Welcome to the Beliefs Bazaar. My name is Alex, and in this episode, I'm going to be talking about why it's so hard to debunk information. And, in our modern context, I think everyone, whatever, spot on the political spectrum you land, you would agree that there is a massive disinformation and propaganda problem. So, something that I discovered, or at least came across while looking into this, is something called Brandolini's Law, which essentially is the explanation for why this is so difficult to do. And it reads, Brandolini's Law, also known as the bullshit asymmetry principle, is an internet adage coined in 2013 by Alberto Brandolini, an Italian programmer, that emphasizes the effort of debunking misinformation in comparison to the relative ease of creating it in the first place. The law states, the amount of energy needed to refute bullshit is an order of magnitude bigger than that needed to produce it. Now, here's a little thing for TikTok viewers if you want to read that. So, what does that mean? That means that, for me to say something that is a lie takes minimal effort, and I don't have to really do much besides profess it, exclaim, whatever. And the amount of time required to debunk what I said is an order of magnitude larger. So I can speak and talk bullshit for 10 minutes, and then it might take someone else, hours or days even to do the required research and what have you to debunk that. So what that means is we basically do not have the time. No one has the time to effectively fact check and debunk everything that comes across their path. And so that, I think, is kind of why we have a lot of the problems that we do right now with the media discourse and whatnot, is because people just do not have the time to fact check everything they hear. So typically people tend to lean towards their pre-existing notions and beliefs, or their pre-approved pundits or, information sources, and they do little fact-checking, relying on the sources that they have to be reliable and to do their own research. So how do we thwart this? Well, I don't have a great way to actually to prevent this from happening. No one really does. Otherwise, we would do so. But I just want to bring up real quick, I recommend looking up this Wikipedia article on Brandolini's Law, because it really, gives some great examples. One of them I'm just going to read real quick. In an example of Brandolini's Law during the COVID-19 pandemic, Jeff Yates, a disinformation journalist at Radio Canada, said of a very popular YouTube video, quote, "He makes all kinds of different claims. I had to check every single one of them. I had to call relevant experts and talk to them. I had to transcribe those interviews. I had to write a text that is legible and interesting to read. It's madness. It took this guy 15 minutes to make his video, and it took me 3 days to fact check." And not only did it take this dude 3 days to fact check a thing, that doesn't even, who's even going to take that seriously, because those people that believed that first misinformation video are not likely to be looking up every way to fact check a thing. So here's a dude that took, it took him 3 days to, with data sources, disprove a very easy to make statement made online about the COVID pandemic. And, so that's just, that's absurd. How do we even attempt to deal with that? And the really only conclusion I can come up with is that we all need to practice and exercise critical thinking skills. Now, this is the definition I pulled from the internet, but, critical thinking is the ability to analyze information objectively, identify biases, and draw logical conclusions, ultimately leading to better decision-making and problem-solving. It involves questioning assumptions, evaluating evidence, and considering different perspectives. So, if you are a person who is not able to articulate how you might be biased or the preconceived ideas that might sway you one way or another for information, you are not critically thinking. That is kind of the point that I would like to emphasize is, it requires an ability to analyze information objectively, or at least as objectively as we can. So identifying your own biases is one of them, oops, sorry. I didn't have any ready examples for that, but you can probably imagine, and in any conversations, you've definitely had a conversation with someone that you're like, well, that person is concluding is coming up with their conclusion based on these ideas that they have that are antithetical to other ideas, I guess, or just a sufficiently different view of the world and, all of the things in it that lead people to dramatically different conclusions. And, I was one of those people, before looking into beliefs and ideologies and stuff, that just thought if you presented someone with the, sufficient quantity or quality of information that they would, of course, make the correct decision. And, as evidenced by, opposing political views, we just don't have that. We don't have consensus reality. That means not everyone is drawing from the same pool of knowledge about the world and things such that they are unable to make the same conclusions. Now, do I still believe that people could make the same and correct decisions? Yeah. And that would require everybody involved to be able to recognize and set aside their beliefs and biases and ideas about the person relating the information or the source of the information. You have to be able to set all of that aside and think about things from a purely logical perspective. Now, that's just difficult for humans to do, period. And so I don't begrudge or demean, I don't want to make it sound like I'm talking shit about people that don't exercise critical thinking all the time. But it's definitely a problem, and I think anyone that is sufficiently interested in, seeking out the truth and, has the courage to admit that they're wrong is, at least on the right track towards critical thinking. I guess kind of the last thing that I want to talk about in this video is give you guys some search topics, because, the primary thing here is, there's a lot of talk about people doing their own research, or that's usually the response when people question other people's ideas or statements and stuff, is to do your own research. Well, that's only useful if you're willing to be wrong and seek information with the attempt of being the most correct, or at least discarding any ideas that you had that were wrong and moving on. If you, they talk, this is how identity politics are used, is associating specific ideas with your identity such that to dismiss an idea is somehow to destroy your identity. And this is very effective. And, the phrase I would say, and you might have heard this in other contexts, is that good people only do this thing, or good Christians only do this thing, or only vote this way, or whatever. That is not an evidence-based statement. That is an ideology and identity-based statement, because it associates, being good with whatever identity they're wanting to manipulate. So be on the lookout for anything that, anything that hinges on your identity, or anyone's identity to, to believe a thing. Is this argument using your identity to try to convince you of a thing? Okay. If it's not, if it's just using facts and saying, here's where this information is from, here's the people who did this study, it was peer reviewed, meaning it has consensus among other researchers and scientists, that is probably better information. if someone's saying, only good people or, bad people want this or that or the other thing, like, come on. We need better arguments than that. And we can't just let ourselves fall for just whatever makes us feel good at the time, or whatever prevents us from having to admit that we were wrong about something. We really need to watch out for that. Okay, so as I'm going to do with a lot of these kind of videos that talk about a specific idea or concept, and I could sit here and read hours of information about all these things, but I would prefer that people do it themselves. So recommended search topics from this video are Brandolini's law. There was many other examples in the Wikipedia article than I mentioned. That was just one paragraph of many. Critical thinking. Again, that's the ability to analyze information objectively, identify biases, and draw logical conclusions, ultimately leading to better decision-making and problem-solving. That is crucial. Just understand the essence of critical thinking, and, you might be like, well, I'm not biased, but if you think that you're not biased, you are wrong, because it is practically impossible for humans to be unbiased, primarily because we all have different experiences and learn different things growing up. So we're going to lean towards whatever our knowledge base or our ideological base is. So, it's not a bad thing to say that no humans can be purely objective, but we can certainly attempt to be so by employing critical thinking. Now, the other two things that I would recommend looking up, because these are barriers to critical thinking, is what methods do people use to spread propaganda? Now, I'm not going to really delve into that, but if you search that, I think you will find some useful information. And specifically, one of the top results that I found when, just look up what methods do people use to spread propaganda. The next one is what I actually wanted to mention. The how do I know if I'm in a cult? Now, that's super useful, because oftentimes when you end up in a cult, you don't realize it because of the way that you've ended up in it. And that is also a super useful thing to look up. If you just search in the Google term or Google search, how do I know if I'm in a cult? It'll give you some useful, the AI generated response is useful. It's just pulled from some other sources. The top search result, at least when I searched for it, was an article called "What is a Cult? 10 Warning Signs" by the very well-minded .com, I guess. I'm not familiar with that outlet other than this one article that I read. But anyway, those are super useful, because even if you're not necessarily in a cult specifically, or, it doesn't meet all the qualifications, these are tactics used by people to prevent people from critically thinking, or to separate them from other groups in society and manipulate them. So those are super useful things to look up. And thank you for taking the time to listen to me talk and watch this video. And thank you again. Hope everyone's doing all right out there.